You are listening to No PC Allowed, aka No Political Correctness Allowed, and I am Mac Iverson. Did you know that we get many of our prescription drugs from the same source that created deadly fentanyl and still imports it into America? It is the exact same source that being America's arch-enemy, communist fascist China. Consider for a moment just how insane this is, how stupid this is. The main purpose for China's importing of fentanyl is not for them to make money off the illicit drug trade. That would be horrific enough. But no, the purpose is to hurt America, and for this to really hit home, to murder you and your loved ones. This is flat-out chemical warfare. Some conservatives want to blame the user for this. How many of us have not experimented in the past, no matter how conservative you may be today? Does this mean that we all deserve to die a quick, horrible death? The main reason why people use drugs is because life is difficult. At times extremely difficult for all of us, and for far too many of us, extremely difficult non-stop from cradle to grave. Anyone who does not have sympathy, even empathy for people like this is, in my opinion, subhuman. But with fentanyl, it's like a sledgehammer upside the head. Once you ingest it, you want it again and again. I don't care who you are, how rock solid your character is. So radical surgery against the mechanics of this addiction is necessary. There must be an actual war against it. China could stop it if they wanted to, but they don't want to. So let's stop calling this a drug problem once and for all and start calling it exactly what it is. It is a problem primarily of a communist fascist idiotology that sees the United States the same way that Iran and many other Mohammedan countries see the USA, that being the great Satan. But that is 100% projection. They are calling us precisely what they are. This topic is very basic. Not too much explanation is necessary here. It's purely right versus wrong, good versus evil. Anyone who disagrees is either stupid or they have dollar signs in their eyes. Oh, but wait a minute. There is someone, the Council on Foreign Relations, and many other neocon so-called organizations who knows who butters their toast. These are the ones with dollar signs in their eyes and power over adrenaline coursing through their veins, power over you to benefit them exclusively. That is why we still get almost all of our drugs, that include ingredients, sourced from China. The lack of exact numbers is frustrating because the FDA does not track this information, I believe, in order to hide the problem. But in a New American Magazine article by Rebecca Terrell, if China stopped exporting prescription drugs and their ingredients to the United States, pharmacy shelves across the country would be empty within months. That's how dependent we are on China. Rosemary Gibson, author of China RX, told the New American, "It's a national security threat that few people even know about. The truth is that America's dependence on a single country for the active ingredients, raw materials, and chemical building blocks for so many essential medicines is a risk of epic proportions." Terrell continues, "That's no exaggeration. The communist behemoth is well on its way to controlling the global generic drug market." The International Business Times reported that, though India still leads in generics, experts note that country receives some 80% of its raw ingredients from China. This means the key components in approximately 90% of the prescription and over-the-counter medicines Americans take are sourced from a country that our Department of Defense considers a major adversary. Think about how China devastated our steel industry, dumping its product here at the low market price and destroying our manufacturing base, Gibson points out. They want to do the same thing with medicine. They've already done it with penicillin. The article continues, "Chances are many of the pills you and your loved ones take each day contain ingredients from China. Even the vitamin C that supplements your breakfast cereal is probably Chinese. Along with penicillin, we ceded ascorbic acid, the active ingredient in vitamin C, to China in the early 2000s. Chinese firms then raised the price of ascorbic acid by as much as 600%. Rebecca Terrell continues, "Big Pharma is so tight-lipped about its sources. Pharmaceutical companies do not want to undermine their integrity by admitting they buy from China. For many American consumers, made in China means shoddy workmanship and poor quality. When it comes to medicines, imperfect ingredients can have severe, even life-threatening effects. Take the case of contaminated heparin. In 2007 and 2008, when 246 Americans, including some children, died and hundreds more were seriously injured after receiving that common blood thinner used daily in U.S. hospitals and dialysis centers. As the body count rose, the FDA investigated to discover the culprit, a toxic contaminant deliberately placed during the manufacturing process in China." Unquote. The poison was deliberately put there. Big surprise, right? China is our enemy. This is way beyond any debate. Terrell goes on, "Fast forward to the present day. Despite scant inspections, the FDA is powerless in the oversight of all these drugs. How did it get to the point where we have so little recourse. We consider our medicine as a cheap commodity to be purchased at the cheapest possible price. That has got to change, Gibson warns. We have to remember that when you control the supply of medicines, you control the price, you control the quality, you control the world. The United States is on track to lose virtually all of its generic drug manufacturing capacity within the next 5 years. Yet, while we surrender control of our national health security for the sake of cheaper prices, Gibson points out we have no system in place to monitor risk. Quote, "It's no one's job in the federal government to know who controls the supply of our medicine. We wouldn't do that for oil. We wouldn't do that for food." Unquote. And there are tremendous health problems resulting from China's drug-addicted stranglehold on America. This from Dr. Russell Blaylock in his wellness report of March 2025. It was recently disclosed that virtually all the products manufactured in China are contaminated with environmental chemicals. Most of our medications, for example, practically all antibiotics, are made in communist China, which would like nothing more than to damage the United States. Of course, the FDA is not allowed to enter Chinese manufacturing facilities, and they are, air quotes, inspected only once every 12 years. Only once every 12 years for inspections. For the most part, inspectors have to take the word of Chinese officials. Many of the capsules used in Chinese products are made from animals that may be infected with prions, a type of infectious protein that can cause normal proteins in the brain to misfold, leading to neurodegenerative diseases. When you put all the evidence together, it's truly frightening. Combine these daily chemical exposures, and you can see the toxic load is going to add up greatly over a lifetime. These substances accumulate in the brain and trigger chronic inflammation, which is the source of most neurodegenerative diseases. Over time, metals such as aluminum and mercury, along with environmental chemicals, keep the brain inflamed, triggering neurodegeneration that leads to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. That being the case, the astronomical growth of chronic diseases, especially those that cause dementia, shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Head injuries, other brain diseases, and aging can make the destructive process proceed even faster. And since the advent of geoengineering with nanoaluminum, we have seen a dramatic rise in the occurrence of neurological diseases. Unquote. All this intentional recklessness with our health keeps scratching away at us in a desperate attempt to wake us all up before it's too late. In the summer of 2018, one of China's largest domestic vaccine makers sold at least 250,000 substandard doses of vaccine for the serious illnesses of diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough. 13.4 million Shrek glasses imported to McDonald's were recalled due to excessive cadmium. China has compromised many dog treats. Hey, who needs quality? It's just for dogs. Why not just treat them like China treats their own citizens, their own peasants? In a crisis, we will need an oversupply of essential medicines. A shortage would be disastrous. So, over-reliance on one basic supplier is stupid in the extreme, especially when it's China. But deep state governments love emergency disasters. They're just excuses for massive power grabs. From prosperousamerica.org by Jeff Ferry. Drug shortages are becoming commonplace in the U.S. Data from a new pharmaceutical industry tracking firm, Oyobo, shows hundreds of drugs are still in short supply, some well over a year. And our dependence on imports grows, including from labs on the receiving end of lackluster FDA inspections. U.S. pharmaceutical imports have risen sharply in the last decade, with imports from China and India skyrocketing. This import dependence is unsustainable. FDA Commissioner Robert Califf admitted as much last year when he warned that there is not enough reserve and supply of generic drugs in the United States. Califf admitted that the stakes are too high. That is, patients are sicker for longer, and some are even dying due to drug shortages. Some of the most damaging shortages are in generic cancer drugs. Two of the most widely used cancer treatments, cisplatin and carboplatin, have been in shortage for much of the past 2 years. A chilling study from last year by the American Cancer Society found that 1 in 10 patients have suffered from drug shortages. One cancer patient reported, "My doctor's office only gets enough for 1 patient a month. I'm currently set to get mine in over 6 months." Last year, the FDA allowed the cancer drug cisplatin to be sold in the USA from an uninspected lab in China. Faced with shortages and a limited number of suppliers, almost all of them overseas, the FDA is actually being forced to relax its standards just to find any supplier of certain badly needed drugs. India also does not have national standards for drug production, instead leaving regulation to its 38 states. That leads to widely differing standards across India, with a temptation to lower standards to attract more manufacturers. The Indian drug industry is like the Wild West on steroids. At the same time, the Indian pharmaceutical industry is highly dependent on China. There are about 100 drugs that are only made in one factory in the world, and that factory is located in China. It would take 2 to 5 years to rebuild that capability outside of China. If China decides to use its leverage, we would be in big trouble. The following from PIIE.com by Monica Boley. While the United States imported only about $30 million of essential medications from China in the early 2000s, it now buys nearly 70 times more, or just over $2 billion. It is this impressive growth of purchases of essential medications from China that is driving fears of dependence, including those due to national security concerns. In spite of these frightening numbers, many claim that pharmaceutical self-sufficiency is self-defeating. They claim that rising animosity towards China could result in ordinary drugs becoming more expensive and the entire industry becoming more inefficient, jeopardizing the potential for further innovation. Although raising the cost of these drugs from China might sound appealing, pharmaceutical self-sufficiency in the United States is self-defeating because it could significantly harm the research and development of the new drugs. At risk is the comparative advantage in pharmaceuticals enjoyed by the United States, a benefit not only to Americans, but to the world at a time when future pandemics are inevitable." Unquote. Now that may sound compelling, but remember, the 2020 plandemic was not inevitable. It wasn't even real. It was step one of the 1-2 punch of the COVID/fentanyl chemical war against America and the West. The COVID scare was necessary to bring about lockdowns which drove millions of lonely, depressed Americans to abuse opioids streaming across wide-open borders. This was China's war-gamed backdoor opening to the successful chemical warfare against America that grinds on and wears us down to this day. To conduct this chemical war, China needed 4 setups. Number 1, a gain-of-function or lab-created international virus scare. Number 2, it needed this mostly fake crisis, which allowed for possibly some 20 million fake ballots to toss Trump out for 4 years. And number 3, this allowed for cartel-sponsored wide-open American borders. And number 4, this allowed for fentanyl pouring in through those erased borders, murdering, not killing, but murdering 100,000 Americans per year. But wait, there's more. Regarding the deep state lie that shutting China off from our drug manufacturing business would harm research and development, actually, Big Pharma spends more on marketing now than on R&D. It's far easier to make money off current drugs than to dig for that one massive geyser payoff. In other words, there are no real compelling arguments for America to continue to whore out our precious healthcare to a bunch of America-hating Chinese fascistic a-holes. Furthermore, think about all the incredible insanity of all their foolish arguments. American drugs are far more expensive, partly because of testing regulations that are needed for safety, right? But Americans still ingest cheap, non-regulated drugs from China on a massive scale. What? This is pure gaslighting, pure dishonesty. This only allows for America's Big Pharma to stuff massive profits in their pockets while China's Big Pharma stuffs theirs. Even worse, it's government-owned. Are you getting the pure irony of their silly arguments? In this regard, China controls much of America's medicines while billionaires on both sides get filthy, stinking rich. And that's all that matters to evil China. From Politico.com, the centralization in a single country of API or active pharmaceutical ingredients starting materials is a global public health security issue, said Rosemary Gibson. Countries wouldn't allow similar dependence in areas like energy or food. In the case of China, she says, this bet is particularly risky. She pointed to previous incidents, such as China's threat to withhold rare earth minerals essential in hybrid vehicle production as retaliation against Japan in a fishing vessel incident, as examples of how the country can turn its manufacturing might into leverage. During the height of the pandemic, China's state news threatened to withhold antibiotics from the U.S., she added. This would have been disastrous because China manufactures nearly all of it. China's top-down political structure is a major vulnerability. For example, it potentially allows just one dictator to order a stop in production if he just imagines some risk to China, no matter what the global consequences may be. And this scenario has gained new salience thanks to the plandemic. Everyone should now realize China is a massive, massive risk to world peace, unquote. This threat of extortion could simply be used to frighten the masses, but even the mere threat of a health extortion is dangerous to world stability. Consider how knuckin' futz it is to allow such a screwed-up country as China to be America's drug dealer of choice. Check out this headline from the Epoch Times just 1 year ago. Chinese universities report deaths of 23 professors in 2 weeks. 5 of those who died were under the age of 60. All these people were forced to have their COVID shots up to date, of course. Is this the kind of country that you trust that is so dependent upon shots for lab-created viruses? These headlines about Chinese people dying in large numbers are pretty common. That entire country is sick. They have nothing to offer America health-wise, so why do we buy their dirty drugs? And it gets far worse. Listen to this. From the Epoch Times. Highly addictive illegal drugs manufactured in Chinese labs said to be 10 times stronger than fentanyl, which fueled the opioid epidemic in the United States, have killed 54 people in the UK in the past 6 months. Nitazines are a group of synthetic opioids hundreds of times stronger than heroin and have also been found in prescription drugs purchased. Cartels and other criminal organizations are increasingly trafficking synthetic drugs even more powerful than fentanyl, such as xylazine, which is particularly abhorrent since it causes tissue necrosis, and its overdose cannot be reversed using naloxone, a drug that can counteract an overdose caused by opioids, including fentanyl, if administered quickly. If the fentanyl crisis is likened to cancer, the United States is already in an advanced stage, according to Michael Brown, formerly a DEA agent for more than 30 years, who now heads counter-narcotics technology at Rigaku Analytical Devices. Quote, if the cartels get to what I call the final evolution of narcochemistry, which means they have multiple recipes that can be used to make stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 precursors to make the required precursors, there's no way, even using artificial intelligence, I think, we can beat this issue in the next 5 to 10 years, he said. The CCP has not only been unwilling to address fentanyl trafficking constructively, but has, in fact, used it as a bargaining chip to force concessions from the United States on technology sales. The Mexican government, in the meantime, is under the profound influence of the cartels. All those chemicals are coming in freely because people are being paid off, and the Mexican government allows it. Sanctions would only be effective if they hit major companies, according to Brown. In 2019, China had more than 23,000 chemical companies and about 5,000 produced pharmaceutical precursors. The Chinese chemical industry produces some $1.5 trillion in annual revenue. That's about 40% of the world's chemical market, he noted. If a few small Chinese chemical companies are sanctioned, it doesn't make much of a splash. But if a major Chinese company is targeted, that would get the attention of the Chinese regime and create a deterrent, Brown told the Epoch Times. He says there is already an illicit prescription drug supply chain. There are dealers out there selling legitimate OxyContin, legitimate Adderall, and legitimate Xanax. The supply chain is already there, and the method of distribution is already there. Now they're just simply putting in new substances into that existing supply chain, which are then being distributed. Mr. Brown continues, now with artificial intelligence coming in, if I'm a chemist, I can go in with a good AI program and I can make a restructured fentanyl formula that is completely legal. It will take law enforcement 18 months to regulate that. By that time, I have another 6 formulas ready to go. We can now see how the internet has revolutionized drug trafficking. It has made it much more difficult to investigate and to degrade. So now we have this 100,000 overdose rate, creating 100,000 deaths a year. And here's the key. It's more a concept of willful blindness. China is understanding the situation and simply allowing it to happen, saying, we're doing what we can, but really the drug problem is a U.S. problem. It's an addiction problem. It's a demand problem. The United States needs to deal with their own problem before they blame China. That has generally been the party line that I've heard over the years from China concerning the precursor chemical supply chain, unquote. And by the way, that was not Mr. Brown's accent. That was mine. Hey, the name of the show is No Political Correctness Allowed, so I don't do that. Just so you know. But here's the real key to America's victory, and it's the only key. This is God using what was meant for evil to do good. What am I talking about? Evil China is imploring America to man up and use the power of Christ to knock them down and out. How do I mean? China has this massive chip on its shoulder, just begging us to knock it off, meaning we can either go to actual war over this, it can come to actual blows, or we can go to the root of America's addiction problem by showing victims of fentanyl that there is something far more powerful. Only Christ can turn these victims into victors. Christians have no desire to have drugs drag them through the muck and mire of life. They want salvation above all else. Only this desire will will save America and dash China's plans to destroy us. There are 12-step programs, but I'm a Christian. I believe in these things. Other solutions. Rehabilitation is important, but remember, once you're on the hook, you can't easily get off. Not with these powerful drugs. There was a recent case in Georgia where a fentanyl dealer was indeed camped right outside a rehab center. So this chemical war against America requires emergency triage. The Producing Incentives for Long-Term Production of Life-Saving Supply of Medicines Act, also known as the PILLS Act, would provide tax credits for pharmaceutical companies investing in U.S.-based manufacturing facilities. This or something similar would be a huge improvement over our current riddled with holes policy of China controlling America's drug industry. Contact your representatives to encourage our health independence. And personally, try to get away from as many unhealthy prescription drugs as possible. Some natural supplements even say China-free on their labels. Buy these, and let's make America healthy again. You've been listening to No PC Allowed. I am Mac Iverson. We will meet again next week and every week.